Welcome, everybody. My name is Jon Clay, VP of Threat Intelligence here at Trend Micro, and welcome to episode 10 of our Trend Talks BizSec. Joining me again is Ed Cabrera, our Chief Cybersecurity Officer. Ed, how you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Great topic. Two-part series, right?
Yeah, we're going to do a two-part series on the business risks associated with the global recession. In the first part, we're going to talk more about the business aspects of it. In part two, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about the threat actors and how the malicious actors may deal with a global recession. So, Ed, in this first one, let's talk more about business risks associated with a global recession. What do you think is going to be one of the big impact here?
I think the challenge for all organizations, public or private, obviously much more private, right? During a recession is the focus on what levers do they pull to really manage the recession. And are one of those levers are the funding associated with cybersecurity programs. And so pretty much they have almost three options, right? One is the option that they don't do anything, they increase their funding for cybersecurity programs, right? They continue to increase the funding for cybersecurity programs. That's one. Two, they actually take a position of let's do a hiring freeze, let's freeze the budget and funding for the program. And then last one is, dare I say, the worst option, which is reduce the actual budget for the cybersecurity teams and programs, and then also possibly lay off folks within those programs. And so
Yeah,
we can talk about which ones are which, but I think there's three options they have.
yeah, and I think actually in the third option, Ed, we've actually seen some of this in the with some of the vendors out there, more in the small vendors, the startups who are obviously one of the things that first dried up was funding for IPOs and some of the initial investments that these companies, investment firms are doing within cybersecurity. So we started to see a few firms laying off personnel. But there's two sides to the whole cybersecurity discussion. One is the vendors who provide cybersecurity, but then you also have all the businesses out there that have to manage cybersecurity inside their organization. So there's two different areas of that. Obviously, and it's going to impact both sides. Because one, if the vendors have less resources, less capabilities, they can't provide the services, the solutions out there. And then on the backside, like you said, if companies start losing funding, they diminish their funding, they cut headcount, they're going to be in a world of hurt because they have less people to deal with it, less programs to deal with the threat out there, right? So
Yep.
let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think I'll take the vendor, the security side, or the security vendor side of the discussion first. One, I think, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see a lot less money coming out of the VCs and these private equities side of the house into cybersecurity startups. I'll see. Definitely, we've already seen it, an area of a lot of consolidation
Yeah.
within the industry. Um, on the other side, on the actual enterprise side, this is the challenge, right? So obviously, if they begin to even freezing, let's take number two, even freezing their budgets and freezing their hiring over time, that is a net loss because
Right.
now, if you start losing, in which you will always continue to lose, it's a high turnover rate in cybersecurity in those positions. And so are you not backfilling because you're in a hiring freeze? So you potentially, from a headcount perspective, will actually decrease, even on a freeze option, decrease your headcount and decrease or increase your risk associated with it. Same thing with the funding. If you're not continuing to invest in the technology and the automation side of the house, now you're at a higher risk because potentially you're not taking advantage of leveraging force multiplier effects associated with automation. And so, yeah, it's a huge challenge on both sides. And I think the one area within cybersecurity that might be getting an opportunity here is the managed security services providers, right? So those are the ones
Yes.
that might be in a position of strength here because as potentially programs either freeze or reduce in size, they're going to have to offload that workload to possibly a partner.
Yeah, and I think, if you think about small to medium-sized businesses, they get hurt really hard in these recessionary times. And so that's where the managed service providers could potentially pick up some new business. And frankly, I think it's a win-win for both sides, because the small business owner and even the mid-sized business owner don't have the expertise. They don't have the threat hunting skills. They don't have the familiarity with the solutions as the managed service provider can bring that expertise, and they can manage the monitoring of the network and of the devices and stuff, and actually do the threat hunting, because they're able to hire those people. So I think you're right. I think that's a big one. The other area, Ed, you mentioned is in consolidation, right? And I think this is another area we can talk about in terms of consolidating solutions. I think we did a
Yeah.
survey and recently, and we saw that most organizations, large size organizations, had about 21 security products in their portfolio. And I think this is a great time for organizations to start thinking about, do I actually need all of those? Can I consolidate? Because you mentioned it, budgets. Budgets are going to get looked at very closely. And if you have shelfware sitting there and you're not haven't implemented it, or if you're not taking full advantage of it, this is a great opportunity and a time to actually look at your overall cybersecurity product portfolio and make those decisions, right?
No, absolutely. So this is where you have digital transformation comes into play. Are you increasing, and should you increase your move to the cloud to increase automation, performance, and so forth, which obviously has a direct impact on your security, right? If you're able to scale your security and you can do it in a fashion where you need less headcount, definitely. So these are the opportunities not only there, but also, like you said, you want to automate and simplify, right? And that's where when we discuss platforms and the power of platforms is the fact of exactly that, that you can really gain a lot of automation within these platforms, and you're able to then possibly reduce your headcount, and you might only rely on managed service providers with, exactly like you said, is from a threat hunting, so a tier 2 or 3 as opposed to tier 1, right? So maybe you do 1 and 2 in-house, and tier 3 you offload. So these are the
Right.
things that you look at and say, what can we actually take advantage of in this time?
Yeah, and I think a lot of organizations are going to get hit with higher costs. They're obviously cyber insurance. We've seen their policies are going up. Their are going, rates are going up pretty extensively. So it is going to be a very difficult time over the next year, 2 years, to even 3 years, I think, because they are going to have to look at their budgets, which are going to increase pretty significantly just because of a recessionary, right? Everybody's going to raise their prices, and so and labor costs you mentioned labor costs. Labor costs are probably going to go up pretty significantly. And this is maybe an opportunity, actually, Ed, for some of the people coming out of college and some of these programs, that they can get these starting roles and build into the more senior roles over time. But they can maybe help offset some of the challenges we're already seeing. I mean, I think cybersecurity already has like 3 million job openings that are unfilled around the world. So this is another opportunity to take a look at that.
No, absolutely. Where you might be focusing on your technology stack on the automation side to improve performance and efficiency, this is a time possibly to look at, because there's a lot more focus and investment from the federal government perspective on programs such as pre-apprenticeship programs, apprenticeship programs, co-ops. And so there might be an opportunity to partner locally to be able to identify some qualified, very eager young students to be able to, or even some that are just wanting to upskill and reskill in other industries and get
Right.
into cybersecurity. So this is where they can take the risk or take the gamble, and it's a lot less of a risk associated with apprenticeship programs, because then you're paying them below scale as they progress through the apprenticeship programs, and then you get to understand how are they fit. Is it a culture fit? How are they performing as they progress through these apprenticeship programs? So you're absolutely right. This is a good time for all organizations to sort of rethink how they're doing business around the people, process, and technology.
Right. And that's the big one with risk, right? PPT is huge in risk. And so we talked a lot about people, we talked about technology, right? Consolidation and doing things. What about on the process side? What do you think companies could do in the process area that could help benefit themselves in this time?
So I think process is incredibly important. I've always said, and said time probably here multiple times in our talks, is the fact that mostly every breach you can point to, the breakdown is more on the people and the process as opposed to the technology per se. And so the process piece is really focused, and it's got to be a top-down buy-in, right? You need to be able to have in a CISO's team in an organization a buy-in to really improve these processes, and to be able to improve them in such a manner by leveraging the technology, right? So don't just do a paper processes exercise improvement. Do a processes improvement with the aid of technology. And we see it a lot. We see a lot of vendors. We see attack simulations. We see automated playbooks. We see a lot of space in here within our industry where there's opportunities either from third-party vendors that provide these types of services, but also internally. It's how do you assess it from the ground up, your processes, and then what are the metrics, right? We talk about with risk, it's all about your key risk indicators. You need to be able to identify those quickly, and then create the KPIs for your teams to be able to, what are the key performance indicators for them to actually work through these problems. And it's only done by process. You can only reduce your risk by good processes and stressing that within your teams.
Yeah, so all good points here. So let's kind of recap, Ed. Obviously, the world is probably going into a recessionary time, if not already. There's obviously people debating that, but we for sure it looks like we're going to be going into that. So organizations are going to have to maybe do some penny pinching and figuring out some things. But on the cybersecurity, obviously, breaches are cause massive headaches for organizations. A ransomware attack can bring down systems, that day-to-day process systems that can really harm organizations. So cybersecurity in general is probably an area that they may want to not necessarily cut, but they definitely can do things to maybe minimize some of the amount of budget that they have to look at, because they may be overspending in certain areas, or they may be to have too many products in place, and they can consolidate. So it's a great time to start thinking about that. What are some of the other areas? Let's just kind of recap things and give some advice to the audience here on what they should be looking at in this time that they could do now.
Yeah, we talked about, the process piece, and linked to improving your process piece is training, right? So
Yeah.
obviously, training is incredibly important, right? You need to be able to have a level of readiness within your groups and your programs, but even more so when you think about the risk associated with users during a recession. There is possible layoffs, there is morale issues. All of this creates a heightened level of risk. And so now you really have to double down on your training and your user training, security awareness training for your users, because of the fact is they might be distracted, and obviously, and rightfully so, that they might be facing that they're losing their job, right? And
Right.
so they might be thinking a little less about security. So I think now training, more importantly, has to be a focus. Again, going back as a recap, on the technology side is looking at to automating and then simplifying your security stack,
Right.
and doing that through platforms. And then ultimately, when you look at, um, try to be able to build that case, it's the ownership piece that cybersecurity programs really have to focus in on, the CISOs within their teams, is say, okay, what do we do now? How can we, like you said, eliminate the fat if possible, right? So this is not only your security stack, like you mentioned, 23 tools or that you have in your stack. What's the overlap? Or
Right.
there's a lot of possible waste going on when you have multiple tools possibly doing the same thing. So all of this is, again, going to PPT aspect to it. These are the things that I think companies and organizations need to focus on.
Yep, all good points. And just to kick off, we mentioned this is going to be a two-parter. Next time we're going to talk about the threat actor situation and how that can be affected in this time. And so I think it'll be a great two-parter. Ed, thanks for joining me again today in
Absolutely.
this episode 10, Trend Talks BizSec. We love to hear from our audience in terms of topics. So if you have a topic you want us to do, just give us an understanding or send us a note. We'd love to talk about it. Ed, thanks again for your time today.
Absolutely. It's great as always. Looking forward to the next one.
All right, everybody, have a great day and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.